So there are some consulting offers that lend themselves to proactive client acquisition, where you simply can go into the market, you just send a bunch of messages to people, and you know that a certain predictable ratio of them will respond, and then you can book a call and then make them into clients. And some consulting offers, they are just so unique and so specialized or so arcane that they are really difficult to proactively book clients in. And in today's video, I would like to show you the test that I apply to consulting businesses to be able to recommend to my clients whether for them any form of outbound, like LinkedIn messaging and cold email, for example, whether that can work, and whether they are better advised to try to become niche famous or if they have to network and go by referrals. Because there simply are some offers that are so arcane that they don't lend themselves to proactive client acquisition. And so this is what I'm going to be discussing today. And I'm going to show you that metric that you can then calculate yourself and see in which bucket you land. Cool. Okay, so let's get right into it. So let's set the scene. You're a consultant. You've been running for maybe a couple of months, couple of years. You've had a few clients, but they mainly came from referrals. So you're not in control of client acquisition. And let's say that you want to get in control. Now, pretty much any offer, if you were able to ask every single potential client in your market, if you could just simply knock on the door and say, hey, do you need this? Any business is able to get clients in this way. The problem is that for practical purposes, it just isn't possible. You actually will not be able to knock on everybody's door and ask them if they could use your services. That's a bit of a problem, because if you cannot proactively, just by putting wood into the oven, generate heat, and that wood in the oven, I mean doing something predictable. If you cannot do that, then it's a little bit difficult to call that a business. If you don't have any form of scalable client acquisition method, it's difficult to call that a business. Then you are effectively a freelancer, or you got yourself a job, especially when you have only one or two retainer clients and you sort of depend on them. Well, what's the difference between that and being employed? And all of this got triggered by a conversation that I've had with a client of ours, actually the one we've been with for the longest time, because he used to sell, quite a while ago, he used to sell one offering. He just couldn't crack that. He just couldn't get enough clients in that. Then he pivoted to another offer, and that now is working really, really well for him. But before I tell you the details of this case, I want to point out that there are practically only two ways outside of networking and getting referrals and so on. There's only two ways how to get clients. One is by being niche famous, by effectively you have so much content out there and people trust you, you have a book out, you have a podcast, and you appear on other people's media that so many people know you, such a critical mass of people knows you, that you just have enough inbound traffic so that you're always booked out. Okay, that's one way. The other way is that you can do outbound. And many consultants do that. You just know that if you email 200, 300 people, you know that you'll book 5 to 10 calls, and then out of them you will close 1 or 2 clients. That's a great way to have a business as well, because any outbound, if it's predictably working, can be outsourced to somebody else. So you just pay someone to do this outbound for you, boom, you get clients. All right, so those are the two main methods. And yes, of course, there is ads. You could run ads to a webinar, but that is effectively the same thing as outbound. You are just forcing your message to land in front of enough people, and you just pay for that. It's the same in webinars and buying traffic direct to those webinars. So it's the same thing. And so when you put those two methods next to each other, being niche famous and outbound, it looks like they're probably equally difficult. Well, they're not. Path number one, the one where you have to become niche famous, is way more difficult. And it seems easy because the people who have made it work for themselves, they're just so present on social media. For example, LinkedIn, people who have hundreds and hundreds of likes per post and so on. These people are so present that it appears easy, but it's not. It's a really arduous road. And especially if you start out with that, you can pretty much expect that you will not get any clients from that in the first 6, maybe even 12 months. And so for 1 or 2 years, you really have to suspend disbelief and just churn out enough content. And then fingers crossed, let's hope that enough people will see it so that you get enough clients. And during that time, as you're waiting to get clients via purely inbound, purely driven by content, well, you better have some savings or any other source of money, because during that time, you might not make much. Okay, so with this scene set, let's go back to my client and his story. He used to work at Google and Amazon, and so he had 2 concepts that he was selling as a consultant. One was working backwards, the other one was OKRs. Working backwards is a product development technique pioneered by Amazon. And the way it works is that you create a description, like a couple of pages, 2-3 pages, where you describe how your customer is using a product that you have built. Now, you haven't built that product yet, but you are sort of envisioning the dream of how the customer is using the product. And once you've established that, then you look at all the attributes that the product needs to fulfill, and you have to go way back into the development and design process of the product so that it can later, once it's built, tick all those boxes. That is called working backwards. Then he was also selling the service package called OKRs. And OKRs stands for Objectives and Key Results. It's a management technique pioneered by Google, where you effectively, for every quarter, you set 1, maximum 2 objectives, and then key results that show you metrics-wise that you have achieved those objectives. So for example, an objective could be become the market leader in a specific product category, and the key results could be increase market share from 3% to 5%, right? That would be an example for OKRs. And so my client tried to sell both working backwards and OKRs. And also, because he saw many OKR consultants in the marketplace, he thought, it's a saturated space. I'd rather go and push working backwards. There seem to be fewer competitors in that space. Well, after a couple of months of pushing working backwards as a service package, he stopped because the only clients that he was able to get came from referrals, people who know him, people who liked him. And then even though he got referred into the business by them, it took forever to close the deal. Budget approval was a pain in the neck, and he maxed out at a potential $16,000 per package that he was able to sell, which isn't much for a consultant, especially when you have such a complicated sales cycle. And it was only then when he actually ditched the whole working backwards thing and purely focused on OKRs, truly understood his persona, and then the business took off. And this story is very instructive because it really shows the difference between an offer that practically only can scale with fame and one offer that does not require fame to scale. And the problems that many consultants have, who I encounter, is that their offer is so idiosyncratic, so unique to their specific client constellation, and the client's problem is that it's just really difficult to get more of the same type of clients. And the truth is that you need a critical density of prospective clients who are in enough pain that they want to act. And what do I mean by density? It's very simple. If you put all of your decision makers into one room, and you could find out the answers to the following 7 questions. And these questions are: number 1, how many of them experience the pain that is related to the problem that you're solving? Number 2, how intense is that pain? Very often characterized by the whole idea of how urgently do they need to act. Number 3, how clear is the buying persona? Especially, is it just one person or multiple people? Not good in that case. And does this person have budget authority? Number 4, can you identify them by demographic factors, specifically job title, rather than psychographic factors? Like, for example, people with confidence issues, right? You cannot look inside their heads. They don't signal these things on LinkedIn. They have confidence issues, and you want to target only those. Whereas if you target only product managers, for example, well, you know that a specific subset of them has a problem, right? There's demographics versus psychographics. If it's demographics, it's good. Psychographics, not so good, for outbound, at least. Number 5, how much education do they need to realize that you actually have the solution to their problem? Number 6, how close is the topic to the inner sanctum of the company? Like, how, close to home is it? Like, when it's something like strategy or innovation topics, right? That's very close to home. And in those cases, companies would rather work with somebody who's either well-known and famous, or who comes really strongly recommended from someone else. They are less likely to respond to a pitch from a stranger. And then finally, number 7, how much do they believe that they need external support to solve their problem? Many companies think, we can solve that in-house. And I call this the critical density test. You can assign a metric to every single one of those elements, and then you just multiply them, and you see where you end up with the score. And importantly, I don't believe that competitiveness is part of the critical density test, because that is purely a factor of how good you are. You can become good at what you do, and then once you are really good at what you do, it's going to be much easier to close clients. You will have the superior results to show, and all of those elements that are in the critical density test are not influenceable by you. They're all characteristics of the market. So that's why competitiveness, I don't factor that into the critical density test. Okay, so you can assign numbers to all of those individual elements of the critical density test. How do you come up with those numbers? Well, you either know your target market well enough already, or if you feel you don't, you should just get them on a call. Just try to book calls with your prospective clients. You can maybe ask even around in your existing network. And if you don't know how to book strangers on a call to just ask them questions, then I recommend that you watch a video that I did on this topic not too long ago. I'm going to link to it in the show notes or the description of the video. Okay, so let's look again at the example of my client. When he was selling the working backwards package, whose pain was he solving? That of the product leader, VP of product, chief product officer, even product managers, and so on. And their pain is that their customers are not taking enough to their product. They don't use it as often, they don't use it as much as the product manager would like to. And so that causes, of course, pain to them. It's their responsibility and they don't hit their metrics. It also is a little bit of a pain of the CEO because the product is not performing, the CEO is ultimately on the hook, but predominantly it's the product person. And so let's do the critical density test for working backwards. Okay, so how many of the working backwards people have that problem? So what is the density of pain in the target audience in the context of working backwards? Now, generally, we could say that maybe 50% of companies are not happy with how much their customers are taking to their product, but we cannot just put 50% here because there's another wrinkle. In many companies, the fact that customers are not taking to the product very well is also a source of contention between the product team and the marketing team. They blame each other. And so let's say that from those 50% of companies, that 50% of those, of the product people, blame the other side. So that means 50% of 50%, which is 25%. Okay, what is the magnitude of the pain? It can be quite high. When the product is not successful, the problem is really quite severe. Clear buying persona and budget ownership. Well, that is definitely not clear because you have this split between the CEO who has the budget and the persona who's experiencing the pain is product. And product teams tend to not have high budgets. Very often they don't have any budgets for external consultants. And so that ended being the actual problem that my client had getting through to their customers. He was happy. He was getting a lot of conversations, just people weren't buying. They didn't have the money to spend on him. So that is a really low figure. Let's give that a 2. Demographic versus psychographics. It is not a problem here because we know who to talk to. We know we have to talk to the product people. So that I would give it a 9. Not the full score because there always is the CEO to still talk to. And so you sometimes have to go in a bifurcated way as you start messaging, but it's still reasonably solvable. Okay, the next one is, do they understand that you have the solution? That is also tricky because working backwards is a thing in the product space. People know about it, but there's many other concepts. Working backwards is not like the clear winner. And very often companies come with but we are not Amazon. We cannot do this working backwards thing. So not quite sure about that. Also, you have this split again between the product people and the CEO. You have to explain a lot to the CEO that this is the right thing for you. And the CEO holds the budget. Let's not forget. So pretty bad score. Let's give that a 3. And the inner sanctum test, how a company builds products is pretty close to home. Right? You should be able to know. You should be very adept at building products if you're a product company. And so them admitting that they are not good at it is quite a high hurdle that sanctum test, as you know, is the thing that tells you whether they would take help from a stranger. Probably not. If they have this kind of help, they would try through some back channels, figure out who is actually somebody who can help them, and they would not accept a stranger. So that is another low score. And the belief that they need an external provider, that they cannot solve it in-house, it's also quite low because working backwards, if they land on this solution, then they might as well think, well, we have heard about this, task someone who has read up about working backwards to just implement, run it as a pilot project. So that score again is quite low. So as you see, the score is only 648 and the maximum potential amount of points that you could get is 1 million, right? You just go 10 to the power of 6 times 100% is 1 million. So that is your potential maximum score. 648 is pretty low. And that is the reason it was so hard for my client to win clients proactively for working backwards. The offer just simply failed the critical density test. But now let's look at OKRs. Here the pain is that generally of the CEO, at least in the company size that my client was pitching to, and their pain is that the team is not aligned. People don't know in which direction to go, and they need these objectives and key results to focus their attention on just 1 or 2 things every quarter. That is a great pain, and it applies to many companies. Okay, so let's do the critical density test for OKRs. How many experience the pain in OKRs? Definitely 80% of the target market at least. Everybody has some form of alignment problem, one way or another. They have issues with focusing on the right things. There's way too many initiatives. It's difficult to focus. 80% easily. How intense is that pain? For those who have it, it's pretty severe. I would give that one an 8 as well. How clear is the buying persona? Absolutely clear. It's the CEO. Sometimes you can go in via regional director, but usually my client works with companies where the CEOs themselves are directly approachable. Recently, an actual CEO of a 120-person company proactively approached my client on LinkedIn. It's a total shoe-in. It's an easy 10. Demographics versus psychographics, also very easy because it's the CEO. You simply approach the CEO, sometimes in bigger companies, again, some kind of regional manager, but there's enough companies that he can approach where the CEO is approachable. Then whether they understand that you have the solution, yes, this also the score is quite high there because OKRs are a thing. Many companies have Google alumni. Many people know about OKRs. They know, yeah, we should implement OKRs. They've even tried to implement OKRs in the past. It hasn't worked very well. So very often they do know that you have the solution. So that one is a clear 10 as well for me. The inner sanctum test is better than in working backwards. It's not perfect because it's still relatively kind of could be embarrassing, right? We should know how to set goals and how to set strategy. That's what I'm here for, says the CEO. But it's much more acceptable to get someone to help you with a management problem. That's why there's management consultants, and they're much more easy to employ than somebody helps you directly with a product problem. So the inner sanctum test, I would give this one a 6. And finally, belief that they need an external provider. It's not a perfect score here because some companies might think, well, it's not hyper complex as a concept. How about somebody reads up about it and then tries to implement it in the business? So they could get somebody on the inside to do it. But generally, it's a much more accepted and common occurrence that there are people who do this as consultants. So I'd give that one a 6. And there we go. The result is 230,400. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why the OKR offer has worked well for my client. And he hasn't even done proper outbound, any scalable outbound. He's just done a little bit of conversational prospecting, but effectively it's all now on the strength of his content that he's getting enough deal flow in that he's doing really, really well. OKRs are simply a much more attractive offer. So based on this, I've created a decision tree for consultants who want to grow. If you're a consultant and you currently mainly depend on referrals, word of mouth, and so on, then take these steps. Okay, step 1, do the critical density test. I recommend that you try to reach at least a score of 100,000. Anything below that will be very hard to get clients proactively via outbound. If you are above 100,000, it's a pretty good sign that you should try to build a couple of outbound systems, do some cold email, do some scalable LinkedIn outreach. All of that is great, and you will be able to scale your business either by hiring people or building products. If you fail the critical density test, or if your offer fails the critical density test, it's going to be really hard for you to proactively win clients. In that case, 3 options. Number 1 would be to network and hustle. And that is basically you're just burning straw for fuel, right? You constantly have to do it. You have to keep it up. It's part of your day to day. You have to continuously, reactivate past acquaintances and see if somebody who you've known back when, you worked at this XYZ company, that they will get you in and so on. It's unpleasant, but it can be done, right? You can build a business based purely on network and referrals and just hustling your way to it, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 a year. It's possible. The other option for you is that you spend all the time you would have spent networking and hustling is to become niche famous. It's an option. It's not the safest option because, again, you need a really long financial runway. But yeah, it's totally possible. If you're charismatic, if you're good on camera, if you're a good speaker on stages, by all means, go for it. Become niche famous, write a book or 2. It's an option. But if none of those 2 are options, and for example, money's getting tight, I would consider pivoting to a completely different offer. And that is really the thing that I would advocate for the most, pivoting. If you fail the critical density test, then please consider moving into something else. Yes, it might be painful for a while, but ultimately you want to get to a business that you can scale, right? That you can get to $1 million a year or even beyond that. You don't want to be languishing and constantly waiting for referrals and hoping that, oh my God, the economy has turned down. I have to now go and get a job. You don't want to be in that situation, right? So if really it all looks like it's such an arcane, idiosyncratic offer, please consider pivoting. And that is what my client did, right? In his case, it was easy because he was proficient in both, working backwards and OKRs. He had been a manager. He also knew how to build products. So for him, it was quite easy to just let one offer go. It could be a little bit more difficult for you, but in that case, I have 3 ideas for you how you can accomplish that pivot. Idea number 1, try to go from caviar and champagne to meat and potatoes. Like, make the offer more pedestrian. Here's what I mean by that. Let's say, for example, you're an innovation consultant. That's a, frequent offer that people would like to be doing. I don't know how many people there actually are who are successful innovation consultants. Many of the people who I see are innovation consultants on top of something that they already are doing. For example, that they're teaching at a university. But innovation consulting is one of those classical cases that would probably fail the critical density test. Very often it's very close to the inner sanctum. People believe that they should or can solve it in-house. It's not really clear who would be the decision maker. All of those factors make it very hard to get clients proactively in innovation consulting. And so an innovation consultant is reasonably close to the whole topic of growth, right? So you could, as an innovation consultant, caviar and champagne, do something meat and potatoes, which would be a marketing agency or sales training, right? You might not have all the skills yet, but it's pretty easy to kind of brush up on those skills, become better at them. And yes, you'll start a little bit more humble. You need to offer a couple of deals with a discount until you get case studies and so on. But those are offers that scale, that you can win more clients in a scalable way. And it doesn't matter that these areas are more competitive. Although the question is, are they more competitive? So it's about going down market with your offer, become a little bit more mass market. And yes, it means that you will enter a space that at least appears that it's more competitive. And that is one of the reasons why my client didn't want to go into OKRs initially, because it seemed like, there's many OKRs consultants. Well, guess what? If there's many OKR consultants, it means that it's actually an offer that sells, that has more potential for you. So don't be afraid of competitiveness, right? You just need to become better at what you do, which is much easier to do. It's a matter of 6 months, 12 months, and then you're going to be flying. And you cannot change a market that has a low critical density test score. So please consider going a little bit more down market with your offer, from champagne to meat and potatoes. The second idea I have for you is see if you can go more down market in terms of the company size. If you have been serving really large corporates, let's see if your offer applies to smaller companies. They are much more approachable, much more targetable, and I mean considerably smaller. Like if you've been serving multinational corporates, don't go for companies with 1,000 or 2,000 people, go with companies with 50 people. Those are much more approachable. The owners will be more responsive, and see if your service somehow can be adapted to suit them. So that's idea number 2. And then idea number 3, if both of those alternatives don't work for you, then I know it's hard, but do consider a complete career change. Because what do you want, right? You choose your pain. And if you stay where you are in a market, trying to sell a package that is low on the critical density test, you will continue languishing unless you really hit the jackpot by becoming famous, which if you haven't written like a book, at least maybe 2 books, more than that, if you have not lectured at renowned universities, it's going to be really, really hard to make yourself famous enough so that you will have enough business coming in. It's not impossible. Right? Give it 1 or 2 years if you have the financial means to support that. Give it 1 or 2 years and do everything you can to become a content monster, right? Go on LinkedIn, go on YouTube, maybe Twitter. Just become as famous as you possibly can and see if that'll work for you. That is the one pain that you can choose. The other pain is that you eat humble pie and you do something else. And it's not going to be super hugely different, right? You can always go, if you're a consultant, you work with your brain and you create PowerPoint slides, then moving from this, doing something like marketing, for example, doing something like operations consulting for a specific subset. I don't know what are your skills, but please consider changing, consider shifting, because you don't want to be languishing in a place where you constantly are worried for, biting your nails, whether you can get clients or not. There is a time for this. You can do this in the first 2-3 years of a specific career, but come on, choose an area that has more promise for you, because really I can tell you life is so much better on the other side. Now that I'm on the other side, that it's relatively trivial for me to get new clients. And it's mostly operational bottlenecks that we're facing now. It really is a much better place to be. This is a much higher quality problem to face operational bottlenecks than wondering where next month's bill is going to be paid from. And that was exactly what I had to do. I had to learn a lot of new skills when I was starting on my business 6 years ago. When I started, I had been fired from a company, and basically the only skill I had is that I was a decent writer. But anything else that I learned, how to get clients on LinkedIn and all of that, I had to develop this. And I took coaching programs, and I failed many times myself. I ran into many wrong directions, and now I've figured it out. So I really would invite you to consider to look at something that has much more scaling potential. Cool. So with that, I hope this was useful. Use the critical density score. Most importantly, I've effectively came up with this over the last couple of days thinking about it. If you think that I'm missing a critical component in the critical density score, please let me know. I would love to hear it. And until then, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was useful. If you want to work through the critical density score with us, consider clicking the link. Won't hurt. We help consultants win clients, build client acquisition systems, and stop depending on referrals. This is what we can help you with. Click the link. If not, no problem at all. I'm not going to be mad at you, and just wanted to offer that. So hope this was useful. I see you around.